90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
On Long Island, but helping lawyers in the metropolitan area to re-examine their position, their goals in this time of the pandemic, and also to help them recalibrate their needs going forward. And she works with other professionals as well. Shari, welcome back to Law You Should Know.
Thank you for having me.
In your prior broadcast with us, which is available on the podcast at nccradio.org, you talked about the situation law firms and individual lawyers are in. I'd like to focus and bring out your expertise in helping candidates in law and perhaps other professions to market themselves and evaluate their choices in this new world we're going into. So what are some of the things that you ask a potential client, whether they're 25 or 40 or 60, in moving ahead and maybe making a slight change in their mix or a change in the field or a change in the work-life balance?
I always like to ask them to look forward and then see what their life is going to look like in 3 to 5 years. And then ask them at that point, what would you like and what challenges you need to overcome to get there. So we have an idea of where they would like to go and what they see as their challenges today. So their challenges might be, let's say they're a personal injury attorney that wants to be a real estate attorney. So how does one make that switch? It's not always easy. Normally I don't handle that because when my clients ask me for a particular niche, they're looking for somebody that has proven success in that area. But I have worked with other coaches and worked where they actually help transition attorneys from one area to another. But to really analyze what you want to do and how you want to do it. And that's the most important question that needs to be answered for me for you to be helped. And what are your motivations? Which I just kind of threw in afterwards. Like, what do you want to make a move? Who do you want to move to?
And also goes with the environment, the responsibilities. Are you a decision maker? Can you bring in work? Can you help people? Can you do some good and earn a good enough living?
Correct. Okay. So
how do you carry forward the process? You've had that initial conversation. Do you interview them more extensively? Do you look back at what they've liked and not liked doing, the type of environment they work in, their non-professional life to help them strike a better balance?
I usually, when I get a candidate that wants to make a move, I ask them for their CV or resume, whichever language you want to use for that. And from that point, we will go over their experience, their skill set, and find out what they like and what they dislike about their current position and where do they want to go. For new entree attorneys into the legal market, hopefully they have had some internships, some teachers that they liked working with, so they have some guidance, because once an attorney steps their foot into the legal world and starts working, they get typecast very quickly. And it's very hard to move from one niche to another, and that's one practice area to another.
Are there some similarities between them, like different types of litigation, different types of writing, different types of negotiation?
Well, I think the skill sets are pretty much, your skill sets. If you can write, you can write. The question is, for some reason, law firms, if you are a great writer and you're a real estate attorney and now you want to become a trust and estate attorney, and if you never touch a trust and estate, they're going to feel that they have to train you all over again. And if you've been experienced attorney and you're making X amount of dollars and now you have to train somebody in a different niche, yeah, you might have the skills, but you don't have the expertise in trust and estates versus real estate. So there might be saying that they don't want to pay you the same type of salary. And using a recruiter in those instances doesn't always work, because as a recruiter, we get paid for bringing people with proven success in a particular area.
And your client's are going to want a track record or a rainmaker in a particular area.
Correct.
Can an attorney have like a minor to go with that major specialty? Maybe one that relates, maybe one that they enjoy, that they can expand over the years?
Well, you can have a trust and estates attorney that does some real estate, and they might do some corporate. Just creating a LLC or sub S is an easier thing to do, but if you have to get into more complicated work with stock options and ERISA and employment law, you're going to really need other attorneys to do that, and that's better off being in a larger firm, so you can have the support in different niches that you can leverage one client with.
Let's take a step back. The person is still in business school or law school or college. You mentioned the importance of internships. Why are internships, whether they're paid or not, so important?
Well, it gets you to understand what you're actually getting involved with. Do you like working in the court system and want to go through government, or do you rather be in a corporation for an in-house position if you enjoy working in that environment versus working in a law firm? They all have, the good and the bad qualities. It's what works for you and what's best for you in your life. If you're going to become a judge, which I did have recently, a judge that I think he was capped at $190,000 a year, which I know sounds like a lot to a lot of people, but when you have a very big family and you have to take care of a lot of mouths, it doesn't go very far, especially in the New York metro area. But it was very hard to take him out of the civil court system to bring him into a law firm to use his skills, even though he had fabulous skills.
And part of those that when you're at that level might be being a rainmaker.
Correct.
That people are going to come to you for a lot of work because of your name and fame and skills, and you're going to have other qualified attorneys do a lot of that work.
Absolutely, depending on what judicial judgeship you're doing. If you're in a bankruptcy court, that might be a good place to be versus in civil court.
And just let's go back to the younger person. So if you're in college or maybe even high school or law school, you can try a couple of different internships or volunteer programs. Use your semesters and summers wisely. Maybe even use the downtime created by the pandemic wisely to volunteer, to network, to help other people, to learn about a field of law, and perhaps you'll like it or not like it.
And that gives you a chance to try something out as a young attorney, because once you start going to 3 to 5 years, and if you have like 10 jobs on your resume in 3 to 5 years, then you're not going to think you're stable. So if you could do it while you're in law school, testing the waters, seeing if you like working in family law versus personal injury or bankruptcy or whatever it may be, at least this way, once you come out of law school, you'll have a better direction to where you want to go.
And sometimes you can segue a little bit, like a family law attorney might also do divorce mediation, or a litigator might have skill set to litigate different types of matters, or go from one side to the other, or different types of torts or commercial matters.
Yes.
Let's say you get a job. What are some tips for the interview, for the employer to ask the candidate and for the candidate to ace that interview? I'm sure you practice with people you're working with.
Yeah, I call it the kiss of death question. Tell me about yourself. Employers will use this just to open it up to see what the candidate will say. I had one candidate, and I promise you this is a true answer. I have 3 different children from 3 different fathers. That is not what my client wanted to hear. You really don't want to talk about your personal life. You want to be very professional. You might want to talk about why you became an attorney or why you going for your MBA in healthcare or whatever it may be, versus saying I'm getting married or I'm getting divorced or I can't have children. That's not appropriate in an interview. because people make up stories in their minds why not to hire you. Your resume gets you in the door, and the interview will either send you out the door or at least guide you in to meet the rest of the crew in the back.
And the idea of that first interview or the phone interview is not to make the sale, it's just to get to the next step. So you have to do what you can to make the cut. I just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. This is Ken Landau, and today my guest is Shari Davidson, the head of On Balance Search Consultants on Long Island and covering the New York area. The other challenging question I've heard of interviews is, what are you bad at? Or tell us some, that where they're trying to get you to admit that you're not so great at everything. What's the best answer for that?
It's always making it into a positive. So if you say, I am really, what is your good quality? I'm really very organized. And being organized, if you're out of the office and you call me and you need something, or if I'm out of the office and you call me, I can tell you the right-hand drawer to the left and you'll be able to find that file. And it's a benefit to them. So you're always throwing back the question back is what's in it for them. If they're asking you what is your bad, what something that you do not well, you can say, well, sometimes I'm a little too organized. You can use this, it could be a double-edged sword, that I'm always double-checking and triple-checking. But once I get the things done, it's done right. So that's, you might be a little slower at something, but I do it this way so you will get it right and we don't have to do it again. So you always want to make
it's a story about It's a story about success and that how helpful you are in the long run.
Yes.
Should you also mention other skills you may have or other success stories that you have a strong background in computers, you're very well versed on the internet, or your uncle or aunt own a bank?
It depends on where the conversation goes. To just throw it into a conversation arbitrarily will seem a little weird. But let's say you do have something that will be helpful and highlighted. You definitely want to figure out how to weave it in.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
If they ask you to tell you about yourself, that might be the place. And on top of it, I have excellent computer skills. I can help anybody get on Zoom if anybody needs, whatever it may be. So you can actually put that in as your cover as they ask you, tell me about yourself.
Or if you have other experience or a degree that may lend itself to their practice. If you have a science background and you're working for patent or copyright, if you have a social work background and you're working for elder law or a matrimonial law firm, or you've had experience in those areas, it might help distinguish you from the other well-qualified candidates.
Absolutely. So as you're asking questions, maybe it didn't come up in the conversation. The questions on an interview should never be about compensation or how many days off you get. But you could say, can you tell me about XYZ practice area? And as they're telling you about it, saying, that's really interesting because I can do this and bring this to the table.
And at the appropriate time, it might be the second interview. You might ask them what areas they're trying to grow, what pro bono. If you don't already, hopefully you've already researched it, but you might see objects around the office or ask them about what pro bono activities they enjoy or they would like to get involved with.
Yeah, and if you did something that's really fabulous in a pro bono case that you did and you wanted to tell them about it, they could and say, and I just did X, Y, Z, and this is the result.
And let's talk for a moment about the paper resume, or even if there's even cover letters today or cover email. What is the best tone for it? What should be included and what should be not to get it to be responded to?
Cover letters, or when you send your resume out, first of all, attorneys are notorious for rewriting their whole resume in a cover letter. Not necessary. You want to highlight an accomplishment, or even if you're researching somebody and you saw that they did something on a particular case and you're really interested in that, you might want to highlight that in your cover letter. I'm really interested in being part of your firm. I was very excited in how you handled X, Y, Z, and why.
And if you had any similar experience, or it's good you know about that, but if you had some similar experience, you've got the Nobel Prize, that's something you want to highlight in a cover letter, or you got special honors at school or in your profession.
Yes.
The most important item or two that might help distinguish you from the other candidates. And we're going to talk about resumes too much or too little in a moment. I just want to remind our listeners, we're listening to Shari Davidson. She's the president of On Balance Search Consultants, and she's giving advice to lawyers and others about some of the mechanical stuff, how interviews are important, do's and don'ts, and now we're focusing on resumes. So what about the resume itself? How much is too much information, too little information? What should be, or too irrelevant information?
Well, you really want to, most resumes to me are like a laundry list. I wake up in the morning, I had a cup of coffee, and the people are writing, I draft. I mean, it gets redundant. So you really want to put in some of your accolades, your highlight, your successes on your resume, make it stand out. And any way you can monetize what you can do for the company or law firm. People are only going to hire you for two reasons. And one is how you're going to make the money, and the second one is how you're going to save the money. So if you can show that on your resume that you save 30% of non-billable hour work, non-billable hours, whatever it may be, that's going to show that you take the next step going forward. If you brought in X amount of business, you could put that on the resume. Or if you work on specific projects, and you could actually have an addendum to a resume that's either your deals or representations or significant matters. So you could say what you've done and how you did it there too.
And if you're very good at, let's say, podcasts or marketing or a blog, is that important information to mention also?
I would add that in, especially if you're, going to a firm that's a small firm that might not have a huge marketing staff, that you might be interested in marketing and would like to get involved with that. You could ask that on the interview and saying, and I did a blog for here, and you could bring in some of your published work.
Or if you're busy, if you're a big networker for some reason, that's your background, you're involved in a lot of organizations, those are other things to mention.
Absolutely.
Is there anything you think it's bad to mention, or is it bad to mention too many things?
I have to see the resume about seeing too many things. I did get a resume from a COO. I mean, he is an ex-Navy SEAL, top clearance and everything. He had a 10-page resume, and we got it down to 2.5 pages. And really, when you read the resume, it looked like he had 35 jobs. But he didn't. He had one job, but he kept being placed, started here and then he's at COO. So we had to show the progression that he grew with the job, and he stayed there for 15 years. So we condensed it and put that. So that's a very big thing that people don't know how to do on their resume.
I just want to remind our listeners that we're talking with Shari Davidson. She's the head of On Balance Search Consultants. And right now, especially in light of current times when many people have lost their jobs, she's trying to guide us and give us ideas on preparing a resume, preparing for a job interview. What should be done following up the interview, if anything?
Oh, got to write a thank you note. And I hate that emails, right? When I started this, we used to have you write your thank you note in front of us, put a stamp on it, and as soon as you got out of the elevator from wherever you were, you found the nearest mailbox. Now we have emails, and snail mail we don't have the time for. So I highly suggest that you write a thank you note, and please do not send a group thank you note in an email. Emails are relatively free, so send one to each individual. You do not need to rewrite your whole resume. All you have to do is thank them for the time that they gave you. And if they said something that was a hot point, and I always use the ridiculous to make my point, if they say they really don't like people who are always absent, you could say, I know how important, being in the office there every day and showing up for every meeting on time. I look forward to being part of your team. Just keep pushing it forward. I want to go over one thing that we started to talk about before the last break. And it also goes to the thank you note. If you're using an iPhone or any other smartphone, you only want it one swipe, because most managing partners, they're not sitting at their computers. They're answering you by your iPhone or whatever device they have. And then if it's a lot of words, they're not going to read it. It's going to be pushed to the side. So you really want to be very succinct and put it in one swipe of an iPhone.
I just want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. This is Ken Landau, and today my guest is Shari Davidson, the head of On Balance Search Consultants on Long Island and covering the New York area. And another practical note, which may be outdated, but when you get to the interview, the process really is before you walk in the door. You never know, the receptionist, other lawyers passing may be judging you. You want to be friendly and cordial and professional to everyone.
It should start 2 blocks before you even walk in the door, because you don't know if somebody cuts you off and you give them the finger or something like that, which I hope none of my candidates do. But if something happens like that, you don't know who's sitting across from you 2 blocks away. So
and you don't want to be late. You really have to manage the traffic, manage a few minutes to relax or unwind when you get there.
Yeah.
You have to plan it very carefully.
And this is another thing. I've been writing little things down that some of the candidates, thank God this wasn't my candidate, but I did hear about it. Person walked into the reception room, which is a great place. They test you in the reception room. You don't realize this. He brought a tuna sandwich in, and he started to eat it with his fork and knife, and it made the whole room smelled like tuna fish. And then he had he went up to the reception and said, "Could I use your kitchen to wash this out?"
How would it be if he brought tuna salad for the staff?
I mean, really, you just don't want to do that. Another thing that you don't want to do if you have problems with parking, you do not want to complain in the parking lot. You don't want to curse at anybody, and you don't want to do it in the reception room, especially if there's marble floors. Everybody in the whole law firm heard about this woman having parking issues. Obviously, she wasn't hired.
Because they want you to solve that problem before you get to the office, or get information ahead of time, where to park, how to park, etc.
And they want you to be professional at all times, because you don't know who's behind the other doors and they can hear your voice.
What other things can people do, let's say informally, to try to get... First of all, is it possible the initial interview will be on a phone call or a video chat? And how can someone stand out in that situation?
Okay, well, video chats are becoming very used a lot. And I know in some of the larger firms with 5 or 6, or maybe they have 26 different offices, they have been doing video conferencing already. They'll put you into the room, you go to the actual location, and they bring 5 or 6 people and they will interview that way. Now, because of COVID, we may be doing this from home and doing it on Zoom, because you could have 40 people in front of you interviewing you if they wanted to. So you really want to make sure you're prepared, dress appropriately, make sure the lighting is correct in your space. If the light is coming behind you, you're going to look like a silhouette. If it's coming in front of you too much, it might be too much white. So you need to practice, and I suggest that you practice with a friend before you even do it.
Should you also watch your background? Is it going to be something interesting or unique about you? An award or an object or a painting? I
really highly suggest that if you have a messy background or have a lot of things, put up a white sheet. You don't want anybody looking at, oh, good, so kids doing things behind you, or, oh, gee, what kind of cookbooks are they reading? You want them to be focused on you. You don't really want them focused on what's in your house at this time.
I'm going to let you give us your email again.
Okay, it's Shari at onbalancesearch.com. And it's Shari, S as in Sam, H-A-R-I, the @ balance search, all one word.com.
If someone's starting out, do you have any resources on your website, or are you willing to talk to them for a few minutes about their goals, as you might be of help to them sometime in the future?
I speak to a lot of young people entering the job market. My website is really focused for the attorneys that have had some experience, work history, as well as partners or even partners who are at the point where they're getting ready for succession planning and moving their practice or buying a practice. But you can go onto my website. There's plenty of information, even on LinkedIn, which is Shari Davidson. It's my LinkedIn profile is under. There's a lot of articles on how to interview, what questions to ask, what not questions to ask, how to dress. So I think there's a lot of valuable information you can get on that.
And obviously you work with your candidates, but if people are on their own, they should work with a friend or relative to practice those interviews, to have someone look at their cover letters and their resumes.
You should always have a second pair of eyes on all of that. You know, what you're reading constantly, you may not see that mistake where somebody else will be glaring to.
What's going to happen going forward in the world of what law firms will look for and what candidates will look for in their next employment situation?
Well, the practice areas that are very hot right now, which was taking a dive, was bankruptcy. But right now, bankruptcy and restructuring is very, very strong. Litigation is extremely strong, and it's going to only get stronger once the courts totally open up. And
there's going to be all kinds of new things to litigate.
Absolutely, across the board. Also, family law. There's going to be a lot of divorces because people hate living with each other after this last 2 months. So those are the three hot areas for interviewing right now. But that's needless to say, real estate, commercial real estate, and trusted estates, they're very active right now too, because they're rewriting either contracts or they're getting wills and everything together.
And real estate and commercial law are going to be big, and people are going to have to renegotiate a lot of details.
A lot of people right now, my commercial real estate attorneys are very busy restructuring and rewriting all of the leases.
In light of current events, and that's going to be a big business. I would like to thank again our guest, Shari Davidson, who's the head of On Balance Search Consultants. Give us your email one more time.
It's Shari, S as in Sam, H-A-R-I, @onbalancesearch.com.
I just want to remind our listeners, if you missed any part of this program, would like to hear anything again, or our other shows with Shari Davidson, you can go to the website for WHPC at nccradio.org. You've been listening to Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College 90.3. Please join us next week at this same time for another program on Law You Should Know.